Jared Taylor here with you after a really exciting few days for the Texas Rangers, adding four veteran players to the organization. Cole Calhoun on a 1-year deal, John Gray on a 4-year deal, Marcus Semien on a 7-year deal, and Corey Seager, the biggest move of them all, on a 10-year deal. Those four contracts totaling in value north of $500 million. The largest investment when you consider just the totality of the contracts that were signed that the Rangers have ever made. So first of all, let's just get something out of the way here. This idea that the ownership is not invested in winning, they're not going to invest in the team. We need to now throw that in the trash can. Whether you love the moves or not, what cannot be argued is that the ownership group stepped up in a big way and they invested a lot of money. And by all accounts, they're not done investing money in this roster. Is there going to be another huge addition contractually before the start of the season? Probably not. Maybe someone like a Clayton Kershaw, and we can get into that in another video. There could be some big names who maybe aren't getting paid what you would expect because they're still in arbitration, the Rangers could acquire in a trade, like a guy like Matt Olson, for instance. But I think next off season, the Rangers are also going to be in a position to maybe not dish out $500 million plus worth of contracts, but another big time deal like a Semien type deal or a Seager type deal. So let's start with that. Tip of the cap that this ownership group stepped up. And the Rangers are in the position that they're in with now two all-star players serving as the pillars of the next chapter of Rangers baseball. All right. So where are the Rangers now? They are a better team than they were at this time last year. And they will likely be a better team in 2022 than they were in 2021. And let's be real. 60-win season is not a high bar to have to clear. The Rangers are not yet going to be considered a World Series contender. And my guess is that when Vegas releases the odds for the upcoming season, the Rangers won't necessarily be considered a favorite for the playoffs. Now, this all depends on how many playoff teams there are with the collective bargaining agreement, being discussed, or I guess maybe not discussed to the present time with the lockout. Perhaps they expand the playoffs, but if you assume the most recent playoff structure, Rangers would probably not be a favorite for the playoffs. However, they are now in a position where the idea of anything can happen is kind of realistic. The Rangers are going to be more competitive. They're going to be in the mix and likely will be playing meaningful baseball after the All-Star break, which we really have not been able to say perhaps since 2016. In 2019, the Rangers went into the All-Star break kind of in the conversation, but it did seem fleeting. And the Rangers were prepared to sell. That's not going to be the case this year. They might sell, but if the Rangers are in contention, they're not going to sell, if that makes sense. So remember, the Rangers just lost over 100 games. You don't, in baseball, go from that to World Series contender overnight. It is incredibly tough to do. This is not the NBA where you get one superstar and it changes the complexion of things, or the NFL where you get, a quarterback who's just a transcendent player and it changes the complexion of things, or hockey where if you get in the dance and you got a goalie who gets hot, look out. The Rangers have taken not steps, but they've taken a leap in the right direction. This is merely another step towards where they want to go. And that's why, this is not a finished product. And that's acquiring more talent in the trade market. The Rangers are going to have more opportunities. We'll get into that in a second. That's obviously the draft that's coming up, having the 3rd overall pick and continuing to bolster the farm system and the growth of the guys they have already in the organization, whether it's guys who have played in the majors or guys who have yet to play in the majors who could be a part of the future. And then, of course, that's also continuing to supplement the roster in free agency. So there's a lot of excitement, and I don't want to kill the party to the vibe. But if your expectation is, well, now the Rangers are a World Series contender, let's be realistic. with where they were and where they are now, and understand that this is still a process of growth. And maybe the Rangers make the playoffs, maybe they don't. If the Rangers do not make the playoffs, this year is not a failure. These signings are not failure signings. The Rangers are not all in 2022. Again, it is still about growth. But now I think you can look at 2023 and indicate that that is a year in which the Rangers could very well go into the season as, if not favorites to be playoff participants, right on the cusp. All right. What's next? So I mentioned more money. The Rangers do have more money to spend, whether it's this offseason or subsequent off seasons. Again, this offseason, probably not a huge big time contract. You could see maybe, I don't know what Clayton Kershaw's market will be. Maybe it's 20 a year, maybe it's 18 a year. You could see something like that. I think the Rangers have probably between $20 and $30 million annually to give out this year. So what I mean by that is, they could sign a guy to $100 million deal over 5 years. That's $20 million annually. And they still probably have another $5 to $10 million that they could spend for this upcoming year that they'd be comfortable giving out. That could come in the way of, taking on a contract in a trade, a Matt Olson or a Luis Castillo or a Tyler Mahle. A lot of people have talked about possible matches there. It could be, 3 or 4 role type players, veteran role players to, add some depth in the outfield or supplement the rotation. And one thing that's worth noting is when you acquire Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, Seager for 10 years, Semien for 7 years, it doesn't render your prospects, in those positions obsolete. Because you never quite know what's going to happen. And maybe, a particular player has position flexibility and you turn him into an outfielder because, man, that bat is just so good. But the reality is the Rangers have a ton of depth in their infield in the minor league system. When people talk about the Rangers having a deep system, the infield crop, particularly second, third, shortstop, that might be the area of the most depth. And now that makes the Rangers really interesting trade partners because they have guys they'd be willing to part ways with who are of value and interest to other organizations. So just, be mindful of that. How did the Rangers get them? What was apparent in the conversations that were had with Marcus Semien and Corey Seager and even John Gray and Cole Calhoun and just the things we've heard? Well, I think it's the whole picture. But one thing that stood out to me is that the Rangers didn't run away from who they were last year and who they have been, and being very transparent. Hey, we're not going to try and put makeup, whatever the saying is, and put makeup on an animal or a pig or whatever. I don't know what it is. I'm bad at those, but the Rangers weren't trying to just put makeup on the 2021 season. They came out and it appeared in their conversations with the free agents and said, listen, we're the Texas Rangers. We lost 102 games this year. We own that. We own that we have not been competitive over the last few years. But we also are here to let you know that we don't find that acceptable, and that's not the direction we intend on going, or that's not a path down which we intend on continuing. And I think that probably had an impact. It wasn't like we're going to ignore what just happened. We're going to address it head on. This is why it went down that way. And this is what we're going to do to change it. I think the facilities did make a difference. Hearing what Marcus Semien and John Gray and Cole Calhoun and Corey Seager said, and it's not just the ballpark. It's not just the roof. It's not just the, how much players love playing in this ballpark. It's the amenities that come with the ballpark. It's the money that's been invested in research and development, the training facilities, stuff of that nature that made a difference. I don't think that all 4 players would bring it up in their own, what appear to be genuine ways if that wasn't the case. I think the outlook, it was interesting hearing Marcus Semien talk about the prospects and his desire to really, impact the veterans, but impact the prospects. And Corey Seager talking about, his research of the organization and getting an understanding of where they are now, but what's in the minors and having an idea that, hey, this is an organization on the come. And then, obviously the money. Let's not act like they were going to come here for free. The Rangers stepped up. and they stepped up in a big way. Let's quickly go through the 4 free agents. One thing I want to say about really all 4, but specifically Seager and Semien, and maybe right below them, Cole Calhoun. The leadership stuff, the presence in the room, the culture building, that stuff's real. Can't quantify it, but I can tell you that stuff is real. It matters and it makes a difference. And those guys are all going to be big parts of that. Cole Calhoun is already rallying players together for those who live out in Arizona, especially during this lockout, in which players can't interact with the coaches, the front office, but players can interact with players. Corey Seager is not a big rah-rah speech guy, but he is a watch me go about my work and my commitment every single pitch, every single day. A leader in that way. Marcus Semien's the guy who he'll put your arms around you, or his arm around you. He'll give you that speech. He'll talk to you if he needs to. But these are all guys who are highly respected in that regard. I had a player tell me that Marcus Semien is the best leader he has ever been around. And this is someone who's been in the majors for more than 10 years and has been around a lot of different players. That stuff's real. That stuff matters. I'm not going to go into greater depths with that because I can feel some of you rolling your eyes. And it's one of those things where, in June, July of this year, 2-3 years down the road, you'll come back and say, you know what? I remember when Jared and other people were talking about this, and I get it. I see it. Corey Seager, he's dealt with some injuries, but not the type of injuries that would concern you, say, like a Carlos Correa. And I was very adamant. I think Carlos Correa is a special player. He's had back issues, and back issues are troublesome. And I think perhaps that's one reason why the Rangers didn't go all in for Carlos Correa. Corey Seager's injuries are a little different. You got a broken hand getting hit by a pitch. You get Tommy John, stuff that, especially Tommy John for a position player is not a big deal. There are questions about whether he's a shortstop long-term. Maybe he moves to third. He's going to play short now. It's worth noting that with the analytics and the shifting and the strategy that comes into play, you can hide some of the weaknesses for a particular player defensively, especially when he's paired with a middle infield partner in Marcus Semien, who's a Gold Glove second baseman. What Corey Seager is an outstanding offensive player. He's a left-handed hitter who very notably is very good against left-handed pitching. So platoon advantages aren't going to have nearly the impact. It makes it harder for opposing managers to kind of game plan late in the game. And it's one reason why Corey Seager is a very good hitter late in the game, when a lot of guys fall victim to matchups and 100-mile-an-hour relievers who throw from the same side with a nasty slider. Corey Seager last year in WOBA, which is one particular statistic that front offices value, weighted on base average, he had the 4th highest WOBA among left-handed hitters against left-handed pitching. And then if you just want to look at the raw numbers, the stuff that's a little easier to comprehend, we can do that too. I tweeted some of this stuff out at Jared Sandler on Twitter. But Corey Seager, if you want to look at last year last 2 years against lefties, 884 OPS compared to a 945 OPS against righties. But 884 is an all-star caliber OPS with a 310 batting average. Actually had a higher batting average against lefties than righties. In his career, he's a 281 hitter, about 25 points lower against lefties than righties. The OPS about 100 points lower. But he's made adjustments over the last couple years, and he has really become an incredibly tough hitter against left-handed pitching. That's significant. He also doesn't strike out much. He walks. He gets on base. He's a tough out. Marcus Semien is a tough out. These are not guys who are huge swing and miss strikeout guys. These are guys who are going to compete and be sons of guns in the middle of that lineup for other pitchers to get out. When they do, they're going to have to earn it. It's not going to be 3 pitches in a cloud of dust very often. And what it also allows is that when you have those two guys, you're building your lineup around those two guys. Now, if you were to add back a Joey Gallo next year in free agency, who is a swing and miss guy, he walks a lot, hits for a lot of power, but he's going to hit 210, 220, presumably with a lot of strikeouts. But when you're not building a lineup around that, that all of a sudden looks a lot different. But you've got to have Seager, you got to have Semien in order to establish that foundation. The Rangers have been searching for that, and they've got it in these two guys. I think Corey Seager's a guy who, of the shortstops who've been talked about, he's realized the most success offensively. You want to, talk about big games, tough pitching. Guy won a World Series MVP. That's all you need to know. Marcus Semien, he's a guy who over the last couple of years has really improved his ability to pull the ball and get the ball in the air. He's decreased his ground ball numbers, increased his fly ball numbers. That's a big reason why his home run numbers have jumped. He's another guy who's going to hit for good average, especially these days. He hit 265 last year. Major league average was about 20 points or so below that. An OPS near 900. This is a guy that, he's twice in his last 2 full seasons has scored well over 100 runs. That's a combination of base running, base hitting, and just your total offensive package. This is a really good hitter. Again, a tough out. He struck out 146 times in 162 games. That used to be a high number. That's not anymore. Guys who strike out less than once per game are among the tougher guys in Major League Baseball to strike out. And he also walked 66 times. So he's getting on base. 3 years ago, or I guess 3 seasons ago in 2019, he walked 87 times. So tough outs. Love that. Marcus Semien came up. He was a below average defensive shortstop, worked with Ron Washington. Mentioned the other day, Ron Washington is probably the most important baseball man in his life. Wash turned him into an above average shortstop, and Marcus Semien played second last year in Toronto and won a Gold Glove. And that's probably his best position. I remember, I feel like when I saw him in college at Cal, I think he played second base a lot. And I know that it's something he did coming out of Cal early in the White Sox organization, coming up through the minors before he ended up going to Oakland, I believe in the Jeff Samardzija trade, but I could be wrong. Marcus Semien, by the way, just want a little nugget, not wearing the number 10. Michael Young has that number retired, obviously. Wearing the number 2 is his dad's college football number, when his dad, who also went to Cal, played football for the Cal Bears. Jon Gray, interesting case here. You look at his overall numbers, and they're not going to jump off the page. It's a guy with a career 4.59 ERA. But let's remember, his entire career has been spent pitching for the Colorado Rockies. One thing I like is that he's actually had success at Coors Field. And you might think, well, if he's had success at Coors Field, then what's the excuse? I think what people don't realize sometimes is that the impact of going from Coors Field elsewhere, back to Coors Field elsewhere, it's tough for hitters and pitchers because pitches respond differently in the altitude than away from it. I remember talking to David Dahl last year, who briefly played for the Rangers, and he said that really what was tough was sometimes coming back to Coors Field after being on the road. As great as the altitude is, all of a sudden these sharp breaking balls aren't breaking as much, but it also made it super tough on the road because now those pitches that we saw are so much better. Well, it's the reverse for pitchers. Jon Gray and pitchers, they want consistency. Well, yeah, maybe their slider's not as good in Colorado, but they have to make adjustments to the way they throw it. And now they're pitching in St. Louis. They're pitching in Los Angeles. They're pitching in Milwaukee. And those pitches aren't going to respond the same. So it's tough for them because they just want the consistency in knowing what a pitch is going to do. And he identified that as a big challenge. So I think, for Jon Gray, who's got a great slider, a good curveball, and a fastball that looks like it can be a really, really good pitch. I think going away from Coors Field is going to help him significantly, like it helps a lot of pitchers. I think it will help with the consistency. I think it will help mentally too. The Rangers, what should be noted is, as much as this organization has had a tough time the last few years, one area they've been really good at is identifying pitchers kind of in that middle of the market area and helping them produce career years. Mike Minor, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson. What do those three all also have in common? The fastball is a big part of that. And one of the industry thoughts on Jon Gray is that his fastball's got the potential to be way better than it has been. And we'll be interested to see what the Rangers do about that. And finally, Cole Calhoun. Again, it needs to be noted that he is a room guy. This is a guy who is going to help from a leadership standpoint. It's a one-year deal. He's not getting in the way of anyone. He'll play right field, DH a little bit. He'll probably start against righties only and not against lefties. It's a guy that, you could possibly platoon with. Dealt with injuries last year, a meniscus that led to a compensation injury with the hamstring, which led to a compensation injury with the other hamstring. And it was just a rough year for him. This is a guy who, he's had a nice career. I don't think that Cole Calhoun is necessarily a huge part of the Rangers' future. He signed a one-year deal, but this is a guy that over his career is a tough out. From 2016 through 2019, a 4-year stretch, all with the Angels, he averaged around 70 walks per year. That's a guy who's going to get on base. That's a guy who over his career is about a league average on base guy, but the difference between batting average on base is a little bit better than league average. The the ability to get on base when he is and when he is not getting hits. And he's a guy who, he's going to hit for some power, not big time power, some power. But I think his biggest presence is just going to be a veteran who goes about things the right way. Again, is a veteran who's played with some great players. I mean, he played with Mike Trout. He's played with Shohei Ohtani, and can put his arm around folks and explain his experiences and what he's gathered from other players. So that's what the Rangers have done. That's just a general understanding of what the last few days have yielded. Now we got this lockout, and we'll pick it back up afterwards. But looking forward to talking more Rangers baseball with you all. Talk to you soon. Have a great day.